Are you attending college or university this year? Then you may be eligible for the AMI Robert Pearson Memorial Scholarship. Each year, AMI awards two $5,000 scholarships to two students with a disability, one in the English community and one in the French. If you are a full-time Canadian student with a disability, you qualify. Don't delay. Apply today. Deadline to enter is May 31st. Head to ami.ca/scholarship for more details.
This is an AMI podcast.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, May the 4th, 2021. Welcome to Now with Dave Brown, coming to you on AMI Audio and AMI TV. I'm Dave Brown. Let's hit the horns and go. Coming up on the show today, the Canadian Blind Sports Association is canceling international competitions and national team training camps for the men's national goalball team. We'll learn about this story and find out how the team is responding with Peter Parsons of Blind Sports Nova Scotia. May the 4th be with you. It's Star Wars Day. We'll discuss the franchise's cultural significance with Dr. David Christopher from the University of Victoria. E-commerce provider Rosie is starting to incorporate accessibility into its online shopping platform. Nelson Rago of Cool Blind Tech will give you the lowdown. And we'll have another edition of our weekly news quiz with a very special guest appearance from the manager of AMI Audio, Andy Frank. He's throwing his hat into the competition today. Looking forward to that one. Let's begin the show with our top story of the day, and that's an update on COVID-19 in Canada. And I've got one story from the international perspective as well. Let's begin with the active case counts. Currently, there are 83,333 active cases of COVID-19. 24,342 people have died. Albertans are getting ready to hear new public health restrictions today as the province's leaders deal with the highest COVID-19 case counts in the country. Premier Jason Kenney says he will be announcing a new round of tougher restrictions prompted by a weekend rodeo which openly defied public health orders. Alberta had 23,608 active COVID-19 cases on Monday, the highest rate of infection in Canada. There were 658 people in hospital, including 154 in intensive care. Nova Scotia Premier Ian Rankin had some choice words for residents after 37 fines were issued in the Halifax area over the weekend for public health protocol violations. Rankin says, though there are people who continue to follow public health rules, some have acted in their own self-interest.
We are in the third wave of a deadly pandemic, and the selfish few don't care. Healthcare professionals are working nearly around the clock to keep us safe, and the selfish few don't care. We are creating contingency plans about our hospitals that are being strained. We have shut down our province, impacting the livelihoods of our business operators. Yet the selfish few don't care.
Rankin says the past weekend was the worst the province has seen in terms of COVID-19 cases after officials reported 146 new infections. Let's look at vaccines. The provinces and territories administered over 226,000 doses of vaccine yesterday. Over 14 million total doses have been given. Over 14.9 million doses have been delivered, which means that 93.97% of supply has been used. All teachers, school support staff, and childcare workers in Alberta will be able to book appointments for the COVID-19 vaccine starting today. Premier Jason Kenney says the government estimates that more than 60% of them have already been able to get the vaccine because of the province's age-based vaccine rollout. He says the province is watching vaccine supply, and he expects bookings for the general population over the age of 16 in the very near future.
This vaccine is our ticket to getting out of the pandemic and back to normal. But right now, it is not enough. Cases and hospitalizations are rising faster than our vaccines are arriving. We need to bend the curve in the next few weeks, which means we need to folks to follow the rules.
Over to Ontario. Ontario's top doctor is urging people to be patient as they try to book an appointment to receive a COVID-19 vaccine as new eligibility categories opened yesterday. Dr. David Williams says the province had booked more than 130,000 appointments by early in the afternoon after the province expanded eligibility to anyone 18 and older in 114 designated areas.
There's been a lot of bookings. We know that has slowed down at first because there's a great rush at the door, if you may, at the start. We've booked over 130,000 already. That's remarkable. So if you had some problems this morning, please stay at it. As we've had in the past when we change these ages, there's a rush, but then it's open and there are places available.
There were reports of long waits as people in the hotspots tried to book a time to get the shot. Staying in Ontario, it may shorten the length of time between COVID-19 vaccine doses as it prepares to receive millions of shots from Pfizer-BioNTech this month. Health Minister Christine Elliott says the additional supply might allow the province to shorten the 4-month interval between the first and second shots.
We expect that with the much larger quantities of the Pfizer vaccines that we're receiving throughout the month of May, that we may well be able to shorten the timeline for people to receive their second doses. And if we are able to do that, then we will be able to contact people. We're prepared to do that manually.
The province has also asked a federal immunization advisory group to look into whether people who received a first shot of one vaccine can receive their second dose from a different version. Over to British Columbia. BC Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry says data show that a single dose of a COVID-19 vaccine offers very good protection, but as vaccine supply increases in the coming weeks, she says the province is considering how to reduce the 16-week interval between first and second doses.
Our whole strategy has been about getting as many people protected as quickly as possible, and particularly moving up the line those who were most at risk. But as we're into this phase and we can open up more vaccines for more people, we'll be able to start the second doses for more people sooner.
Henry says COVID-19 infection rates in BC are slowly but surely decreasing, though there are transmission hotspots and the number of people in hospital remains high. Let's get to a national story about COVID-19. Foreign Affairs Minister Marc Garneau will stay in a quarantine hotel for a few days, starting tomorrow upon his return from a business trip to the United Kingdom. Karen Rebo has the details.
Marc Garneau is currently in central London, attending the first in-person meeting of G7 foreign and development ministers in over 2 years. His spokeswoman, though, says his cabinet privilege gets him no special treatment. He and his traveling partner, Director of Communications Ricky Landry, will abide by the same rules every Canadian has to follow after traveling outside the country. In addition to taking daily rapid COVID tests during the trip, they'll have tests before and after boarding their flight to Canada, and they'll stay at a government-approved hotel for 3 days. Karen Rebo, the Canadian Press.
And now looking south of the border, very far south, Florida's governor is moving to end any local COVID-19 restrictions that may still be in place. Mark Remillard has more.
With the swipe of his pen, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has terminated all local COVID-19 restrictions in the state.
I'm going to suspend, under my executive power, the local emergency orders as it relates to COVID. I think that's the evidence-based thing to do.
The announcement of that coming at a press conference at a St. Petersburg restaurant. The move caught some local leaders in South Florida off guard. They're calling that move a power grab. Mark Remillard, ABC News.
America blows me away because they're always worried about government overstretch. They always say, we need the division of states and the federal government to make sure that the people in Washington aren't overstretching their power. And then you get down to the state level, and there's not a lot of talk of, the people in Tallahassee really overstretching their power to the rest of the state. It's very strange. That's my revelatory statement for the day. America can be very strange. Let's get to the daily polls. At AMI Audio on Twitter, Accessible Media Inc. on Facebook. Yesterday's results. In your personal or professional life, do you have to-do lists or checklists? 93% of you said yes. 0% of you said no. And only 7% of you said, only if I have to. 93%. We have some efficient, organized people who listen to and watch this show. Wow. Daily poll for today. It is Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. So I'm asking you at AMI Audio on Twitter, Accessible Media Inc. on Facebook, what is the best Star Wars movie or TV series? Now, if you do select other, we ask that you write in your response. So the options that I've put down here are A New Hope. That was the first movie, Star Wars. The Empire Strikes Back, the second movie of the first trilogy. The Mandalorian, the Disney Plus series that's garnered quite a bit of positive attention, or other. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to vote other. I'm going outside the Skywalker saga. Rogue One was amazing. But let's go over to Mike Ross. Mike, what's your favorite Star Wars movie?
I go to the beginning, Dave, and I don't mean like the fourth beginning. I go to the original beginning for me. A New Hope, the very first Star Wars movie ever to hit the big screen. That was the one I grew up with. That's the one I had all the toys from. And then certainly moving on to The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. But A New Hope was the beginning for me, the arrival of these characters, and characters have never gone away. Mm-hmm. So I'm going back to A New Hope as my favorite Star Wars movie.
Yeah, it was a marvel of filmmaking at the time, and it was something that people had not seen before. So it was so significant just in that sense that it was a sci-fi story delivered in a packaging that people had not necessarily seen before on the big screen. Nazreen Abdelmajid, what about you? What's your favorite piece of Star Wars content?
I'm going to get a lot of hate about this, but I've never watched Star Wars. Okay. It's always been one of those, it's one of those movies where you always want to see, but I feel like people hype it up too much. So I'm like, I don't want to get disappointed, but I will get to the Star Wars movie eventually.
Well, you do have Disney Plus, so eventually you can take the deep dive. But it does, it's one of these things where if you're going to start watching it, it might end up taking like 27 hours of your life. So
exactly.
That's a lot of time. Daniel Penamondo, former film production student. What is your favorite Star Wars movie, or what's the best Star Wars
I'm glad you
product?
prefaced it that way, because I'm really going to show like how much of a film buff I am. I've only seen 2 of them. I've only seen the original, and I believe it was The Phantom Menace, which was that the one with the pod racing?
Episode 1, yeah.
And I know people hate the prequel trilogy, but just purely for nostalgia reasons, I'm going to go with Phantom Menace, because I just have great memories. I think I went to my friend's birthday, and we all went to that movie, and I was amazed by the pod racing scene at the time. And also the video game. They had a pod racing video game
for Nintendo 64.
Yeah, which was amazing. So purely for, I'm throwing my, quote unquote film buff title, if I ever even had that in the first place. I'm throwing it out the window, and I'm going Phantom Menace.
I'm surprised they didn't make you watch it in film school.
Well, they made me watch the first one, the original, which Star Wars is absolutely not my thing. I'm not huge into sci-fi like that. It's just not my thing.
Fair enough. At AMI Audio on Twitter, Accessible Media Inc. on Facebook. We did get a text in here to my phone from our senior producer, Andrika Delanarol, who says that not a lot of people will say Return of the Jedi, but she loved it because of the introduction of the Ewoks. At AMI Audio on Twitter, Accessible Media Inc. on Facebook. Let's head over to Nazreen Abdelmajid. She has your national weather update.
Thanks, Dave. Here is your AMI National Weather Report from Environment Canada. In St. John's, we're expecting to be clearing with a high of 9. Halifax, a mix of sun and clouds with a high of 15. In Montreal, cloudy with a chance of showers and a high of 16. In Ottawa, cloudy with a chance of showers, fog patches dissipating with a high of 15. In Toronto, cloudy changing to a 70% chance of showers and a high of 13. In Thunder Bay, cloudy, chance of flurries or rain showers with a high of 9. In Winnipeg, a mix of sun and clouds with a high of 10 and a wind chill of -12. In Saskatoon, sunny, becoming a mix of sun and clouds with a high of 13 and a wind chill of -10. In Calgary, mainly sunny, cloudiness increasing, then a few showers. There's a risk of a thunderstorm with a high of 11. In Edmonton, mainly cloudy with a chance of showers and a high of 12. In Yellowknife, it's sunny with a high of 5 and a wind chill of -14. Moving to Vancouver, clearing with a high of 15. And in Victoria, mainly cloudy with a chance of showers, clearing with a high of 15. And that was your AMI National Weather Report from Environment Canada.
Thank you very much, Nazreen. Coming up next, the Canadian Blind Sports Association is cancelling international competition and national team training camps for the men's national goalball team. We'll learn more about this story and find out how the team is responding with Peter Parsons of Blind Sports Nova Scotia. This is Now with Dave Brown on AMI. Welcome back. It's Now with Dave Brown on AMI Audio and AMI TV. On April 16th, the Canadian Blind Sports Association hosted a meeting to present their new high-performance strategy. The announcement included the dismissal of the men's goalball coaches and the cancelling of international competition and national team training camps for the men's national team. The team has since expressed concern over the strategy and believe it has potential to impact the existence of men's goalball in Canada. Joining us now to share more insight into this matter is Peter Parsons, the chair of Blind Sports Nova Scotia. Peter is also a member of the national men's team, and he joins us via Zoom in Nova Scotia. Peter, thank you for making time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me, Dave.
So, Peter, let's start with some understanding here and some broad strokes. Let's talk about the high performance strategy. Can you help us understand what exactly the strategy is and what it entails?
Well, like you just said, basically they eliminated our coaching positions, and we're told that we no longer need our coaches because we will no longer be having national team training camps or international competitions until 2025. And in the meantime, we're supposed to, just train in our provinces to meet certain benchmarks, which we don't know what these benchmarks are at this point, but goalball is a team sport, Dave, and across the country, we don't even have enough players in a particular province to play a game. So how are we supposed to develop our goalball skills to be able to compete at an international level just practicing provincially? It's something that we're just totally baffled by. That makes no sense to us. The goal with the plan is for us to be on the podium in 2028. And so we're missing out on these valuable international competitions. We're supposed to have the Americas Championships in Brazil in the fall, and that's a qualification for the qualification tournament for the World Championships in 2022. I think of major games like Para-Pan Ams in Chile in 2023. Anybody who knows anything about sports, if your goal is to be on the podium, say 2028, well, these are very valuable experiences that are just taken away from us, and we have some athletes who are veteran players, some who are right in their prime, and we have a number of in their early 20s that missing. I'm afraid we're going to lose athletes.
Peter, the answer to this might be a little bit self-evident, but I want to ask it anyway. Can you describe a little bit more what the loss of national training camps means for the overall capacity of the program?
Yeah, well, we just had a training camp a month or two ago, and it's a chance for the athletes from across the country to come together and train. Like if I'm thinking as wearing my hat as the chair of Blind Sports Nova Scotia for a second, we had an athlete who went to the last training camp. Two of us couldn't go because we had to quarantine for 2 weeks upon returning. But the athlete that went is an 18-year-old who, when he came back, I just saw his game elevated at our provincial practices. He was so highly motivated before going, after coming back. So not having these national team training camps, that's another thing. How are athletes supposed to stay motivated training in their provinces with no competitions to play for? I was just on a committee with CBSA, competition review committee, and in that we discussed the importance of meaningful competition and how there's not enough competition as it is in goalball, and so to take away the international tournaments, it's against the long-term athlete development plan that CBSA has put together, because when you're at the train to win stage, you need international competition is so important. It's against our athlete agreements, where we're scheduled for a certain amount of training camps in the year, the Americas Championship and championships in Brazil, where we'd play, to hopefully qualify for World Championships in 2022, getting, meaningful games against some of the top, like Brazil, who are the world champions, USA, who are Paralympic silver medalists from 2016. It's really hard to wrap our heads around this, and it's something that the decision was made, and it was considered a high performance decision, we're told, so it didn't need board approval from the CBSA. But when I think of a high performance decision, I think of who's going to make which team or that type of thing. But this impacts, it's taken away a whole program. It impacts budgets. The provincial sports organizations, the PSOs, none of them are in favor of this. It's very concerning. It's very concerning for the future of men's goalball. And I hear talk that CBSA are wanting to focus on the grassroots. Well, in Nova Scotia, as an example, we've been working so hard over the last few years to develop a junior program, and 2 out of our 3 players that are in the national team pool right now come through the junior program. One's 18 years old, one's 21 years old, and they're pretty much stuck now. Like they can't progress further. They need the national team training camps, the international competition, the national team coaches. Like we had national team coaches with a combined 25 years of experience, and that's all out the window right now. It's very concerning, and we have a high. Sorry, I was just going to say we have a high performance director who's new, and we there wasn't the proper consultation for this plan.
So let's talk about that consultation. Before the announcement in mid-April, were there any discussions about the implementation of this strategy?
We had heard nothing. Like I said, a few weeks prior to that, we had a training camp. There was no talk of anything. We're talking about our next training camp in June, and the next training camp in July, and getting ready for the Americas tournament in October. And then all of a sudden we have a Zoom call on a Friday evening, and we're told that the coaches have been eliminated, and this plan was going ahead. No international competitions, no training camp. So we're just as a team, we're a lot of athletes have put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this over the years, and we have like up and coming athletes like I was just explaining, that's come up through the junior ranks, that the next step is that international competition. So the we're upset, we're hurt, we don't know what we don't know what to think. It's fortunately, our provincial sport organizations are very concerned. So I'm hoping that, the decision can be reversed, or, what's going to happen next. I'm not really sure, but we're united as 12 strong on this team, and we know it's not right, and we're going to, fight for what we believe is right.
Following the announcement, has the CBSA provided any further clarification on the decision? Is the men's team working with them to potentially find a solution?
Well, they had a PSO call, so that's like the blind sports provincial organizations across the country, on the following Tuesday. 2 weeks ago, actually, where they presented the plan, the high performance strategy, and we're looking for feedback from the provinces on how they could work together going forward. And pretty much right away, and unanimously across the country, across the provinces, the feedback that they received was, you need a men's national team. It was like, I think one of the first comments one of the representatives from the province said. So yeah.
What are the next steps for the team moving forward? What can we expect?
Well, an appeal has been filed as per the CBSA appeal policy that's available on their website. So and besides that, we're talking with our provincial sport organizations about what could be possible, and so and just getting the awareness out there that this decision didn't have proper consultation.
Peter, I can hear the frustration in your voice. I know this is a difficult story, but thank you for taking some time to shed more light on it with us and talk it out. So we really appreciate it, and please keep us up to date with the next steps as they occur.
Will do, Dave, and thank you very much for having me.
That is Peter Parsons of Blind Sports Nova Scotia. Peter's also a member of the national men's goalball team. I want to note that we have reached out to the Canadian Blind Sports Association for an interview or comment on their strategy and decision. They have respectfully declined an interview at this time and have not provided a statement on the matter. Coming up after the break, we'll have Mike's big business story of the day. I've also got a couple of news stories for you and the accessibility story roundup. But first, here is Canadian Press reporter Karen Rebo with your morning business minutes.
Canada's main stock index was driven higher by stronger commodities yesterday to start the new month off on a high note after a record-setting April. Toronto's TSX index gained 104 points to 19,213. New York's Dow Jones average surged 238 points, and the Nasdaq was off by 67. Tokyo and Shanghai markets remained closed today for holidays. Our dollar is trading overseas this morning at 81.22 cents U.S. Suncor Energy is reporting positive first quarter net earnings on higher production, lower costs, and stronger oil and gas prices. The Calgary-based oil sands producer and refiner reports net earnings of $821 million in the first 3 months of 2021, compared to a net loss of $3.5 billion a year ago. And Bill and Melinda Gates are splitting up. The Microsoft co-founder and his wife announced in identical tweets yesterday they've made the decision to end their 27-year marriage, but they will continue to work together at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. From the Canadian Press Business Desk, I'm Karen Rebo.
Welcome back. It's Now with Dave Brown on AMI Audio and AMI TV. Mike Ross is standing by with the big business story of the day, but I've got a couple of news stories to share with you from the world of federal politics, beginning with Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole says his party will ask the House of Commons to support a motion calling on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to fire his Chief of Staff, Katie Telford. The call comes over the government's handling of sexual misconduct allegations against retired General Jonathan Vance. But NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says the controversy goes much higher than Telford.
For me, this doesn't go to staff. This goes directly to the Prime Minister. We've got a Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, who knew about these allegations, knows about them now for sure, and has yet to do anything.
Meantime, the opposition parties are up in arms after a parliamentary committee meeting in which members were expected to debate calling Telford to testify was cancelled without notice. And that continued into question period yesterday, where misadventures with webcams continued in the House of Commons. Government House Leader Pablo Rodriguez was caught swearing lustily during question period as opposition MPs grilled the Liberals over their handling of these sexual misconduct allegations against Vance. Rodriguez appeared to be upset that someone had directed Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan to respond to a question about cancellation of a Defence Committee meeting earlier in the day, rather than the committee's chair, Liberal Karen McCrimmon.
L'honorable ministre.
Mr. Speaker, I have all the respect.
Did you send it to Sajjan?
Order. I'm not sure exactly where that language came from, but I believe we as parliamentarians deserve an apology.
Rodriguez, who was participating virtually in the proceedings, had not muted himself, so his off-color remarks were heard by everyone who tuned into QP. He immediately owned up to being the source of the unacceptable language and apologized. Early during question period, MPs were reminded to put themselves on mute when not being recognized to speak. Then over to Quebec. A provincial commission has tabled a report into Quebec's youth protection system, calling for the creation of a kids charter among several recommendations aimed at shifting priorities to prevention. Commission Vice President André Lebon says the recommendations come after 2 years of casting a wide-ranging look at the system triggered by the 2019 death of a 7-year-old girl in the system from Granby, Quebec. Lebon told the news conference there's a good base, but kids and families at risk need to be identified earlier.
We have a very, very strong basis. We're not starting from scratch. So that's the good part that's the best part of the news. The other part, yes, it needs a very severe shift, and we have to do more earlier and preventively.
Premier François Legault assured the Commission's report will not be shelved and the province will work to implement the recommendations. Let's bring in Mike Ross. It's time for the big business story of the day. Well, Mike, what is your attention in the world of business this morning?
Well, Dave, I'm going to talk about something that maybe a lot of people haven't thought about as far as business or a type of business that has been hit by the pandemic, and that is kids' camps. So we're starting to think about the summer, and we're starting to think about things reopening, patios, restaurants. But what about the kids who go to summer camp? Camp Kawartha, for example, is a camp that's celebrating its 100th year this year, but it could also be its last because of the pandemic. They've largely been unable to operate, didn't open last year, and because of that, may not even open this year, and have been racking up huge deficits as the pandemic has gone on. Now, they're a not-for-profit organization, so they can't afford to lose a lot of money. And even with things like the Ontario Small Business Support Grant, which brought them about $40,000, there have been things like federal COVID loans, regional relief funds, but losses for one camp, Dave, can be upwards of $2 million already.
Wow.
So, that 40 grand and a couple of extra other loans, it's just a drop in the bucket when you're looking big picture. And the concern here is that it's not only going to be the closing of these organizations and the impact that it's going to have on kids not having a camp to go to, but it's the fact that there aren't going to be jobs for the youth that count on those jobs. And also, we're talking about youth who need those jobs and youth who need a break after a year or more of in school, out of school, online learning, being away from their friends, their family. This camp is something for a lot of these kids, and in many instances, underprivileged kids, getting an opportunity to get away, getting to experience something that often impacts them and they remember for a lifetime. So it's a business that I don't think a lot of people necessarily think of as being affected by closures and by the pandemic. But clearly, the estimation is that 4 in 10 camps that were around in 2019 will not be there in 2022.
It really speaks to the duration of the pandemic, Mike. I think we all understand that last summer was a write-off, right? We were still scrambling, trying to understand what COVID-19 truly was. But as you say, to go into this summer, once again with uncertainty as we begin the month of May, typically a lot of these rosters, I'm using sports expressions here, but a lot of the roles and the bunks would already be filled. A lot of the jobs would be given to counselors in training and lifeguards and so many individuals at these sleepaway camps and day camps too. They would have their plans in place. They'd be ready to roll by the first week of July, if not the last week of June. So it really does speak to the duration of the pandemic and at this point what is a sustained upheaval of business models. It really it's devastating for so many for so many places, for so many businesses. And you're right to identify the summer camp and the sleepaway camp jurisdiction, which we haven't seen, as you mentioned, a lot of attention being paid to.
And it speaks to the sensitivity, the fragility of that business model, because let's face it, some of the bigger camps that are run by larger organizations, for example, in the article in the Toronto Star talks about camps that are run by the YMCA or YWCA. Those will have a much better chance of surviving because they're under the umbrella of a huge organization that has a solid footing. But when you're talking about some of these other smaller camps that have been around, in the case of Camp Kawartha, for 100 years, and yet is still fragile and is still, on the brink and teetering there, even after 100 years of running a successful camp, that speaks to 4 in 10 of those camps out there, Dave. That's distressing.
And even a year like last year with no revenue, you still have to do a lot of maintenance. Maybe not the same kind of maintenance as you do on a full summer load, but those cabins, water damage, nature damage, etc. We got to make sure the beehives are taken away. If you can't have wasps' nests everywhere.
That's the other concern that's brought up in this article, Dave, is what do you do if these camps shut down? What do some of the regions do with that land? Now, of course, the cynic in me says there's a developer ready to jump on those properties, especially when you're talking about being up in cottage country. And this is not an Ontario only problem, right?
No, certainly not.
All over the country, but there are large swaths of land that developers are just kind of sitting there waiting and salivating a little bit, and yet I just think of the kids that are going to be missing out on those opportunities.
Absolutely. Hey, Mike, thank you for flagging this one. It's been underreported and under-talked about, so thanks for taking a bit of time with us today.
Thank you, Dave.
That's Mike Ross with the big business story of the day. I have your accessibility story roundup. Got a couple stories for you today. The first one coming out of Nova Scotia, written by Francis Willock of CBC News. New Human Rights Commission head to take aim at accessibility and racism. The new director and CEO of the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission says tackling accessibility issues and systemic racism are his two main priorities as he begins his 5-year term. Joseph Fraser, a native of Dingwall, Nova Scotia in Cape Breton, stepped into his new role on April the 19th. Fraser was previously the Director of Human Rights and Equity Services at the Nova Scotia Community College. He also worked for the Nova Scotia Public Service Commission, where he was responsible for government-wide workplace policy and diversity programming. A key priority, Fraser said, is ensuring the commission is, quote, firing on all cylinders and is accessible, effective, and efficient as possible. The commission has a diverse and committed staff, he said, but large caseloads. Human rights officers are working on up to 35 cases at any given time, and the increasing complexity of those files mean there are challenges such as lags in responding to inquiries and meeting deadlines. Fraser said one of the first things he will do is ensure all staffing vacancies are filled. He also noted that providing resources such as legal support to self-represented complainants and respondents may make the complaint process smoother and more efficient. The next story comes to you from the Toronto Star, written by Brendan Kennedy. People with disabilities face confusion and other barriers to getting COVID-19 vaccines. A task force is working to change that. Now, I just want to read you one passage from this article, and I'm going to read it to you twice because I think it speaks to the frustration that some individuals with disabilities are facing in this province. So this is a passage right from the article. It's one paragraph. People with disabilities, whether physical or intellectual, are eligible to be vaccinated in the current phase of the province's rollout, but disability is not listed among the eligible groups in the province's online vaccine booking portal. You would have to know that your disability, depending on what it is, puts you into the either high-risk or at-risk health conditions category, and then you will be instructed to call your local public health unit, which, depending on where you live, will tell you whether you can actually book an appointment. Let me read that for you one more time because there's a lot of commas in that sentence. People with disabilities, whether physical or intellectual, are eligible to be vaccinated in the current phase of the province's rollout, but disability is not listed among the eligible groups in the province's online booking portal. You would have to know that your disability, depending on what it is, puts you into either the high-risk or at-risk health conditions category, and then you would be instructed to call your local public health unit, which, depending on where you live, will tell you whether you can actually book an appointment. Yeah. And you wonder why people are confused. And I'll make one more point. I know a lot of you listening to this show feel like I probably take maybe an unfair eye towards the province of Ontario. It could be a little bit of bias because I live here, but these are the things that I notice because I do indeed live here. I'm sure there are lots of shortcomings across the rest of the country in regards to provincial eligibility for people with disabilities. But let me just share something with you that I experienced on YouTube last night, where you can see plenty of commercial pre-rolls to the video you're about to watch. And I got a Province of Ontario vaccine rollout video pre-roll. The thing is, I wouldn't have been able to tell you that it was a vaccine pre-roll video if I didn't have some sight, because there was no voiceover. The font was teensy tiny, and the website was illegible if you were watching on a phone. So the government paid the money to do the commercial that doesn't orate the information and doesn't make the information readable on a device where people watch a lot of YouTube videos. That's a problem. Okay, I'll settle down and remind you that applications are open for AMI Scholarship. If you are a Canadian student with a permanent disability, you can learn more about how you can apply for the 2021 AMI Robert Pearson Memorial Scholarship by visiting ami.ca/scholarship for more information. That's ami.ca/scholarship to find out how you can apply for one of two $5,000 bursaries, one for a student studying in English and one for a student studying in French. The 2021 AMI Robert Pearson Memorial Scholarship, ami.ca/scholarship for more. Coming up next, we'll discuss Star Wars Day and explore the cultural significance of the franchise with Dr. David Christopher of the University of Victoria. This is Now with Dave Brown on AMI. Welcome back. It's Now with Dave Brown. May the 4th be with you. It's May the 4th, an annual and informal commemorative day for fans across the globe and to honor the Force and talk about Star Wars franchise and all of its glory. Here to discuss the cultural significance of the films and all things Star Wars is Dr. David Christopher from the Department of Art History and Visual Studies at the University of Victoria. He also teaches a course called Star Wars, A Cultural History, and joins us via Skype in Victoria, British Columbia. Dr. Christopher, thank you so much for making time to be with us on the show today. We're so appreciative.
Good morning, Dave.
So today, social media will be bursting with quotes, memes, and posts celebrating the films, but let's try and unpack why it's such a big deal. There's no doubt the franchise is groundbreaking, but what historical impact has it had on the film industry?
That's a huge question, and there's no small answer to it. In fact, there's no single answer to it. You really need to identify which element of culture or history that you're referring to. You know, from a cinematic perspective, George Lucas's original 1977 film was, of course, incredibly groundbreaking. Along with a few years earlier, you had 2001: A Space Odyssey, and along with it, you had Spielberg's Jaws, and these sort of redefined what the blockbuster film was. And they redefined the way people talk about films and the way that people expected certain degrees of special effects and certain degrees of visual perfection in terms of what they were seeing online. He developed Industrial Light and Magic, and he did extensive practical special effects. But, you know, that's just from a cinematic perspective where he basically reformulated the model for creating large budget blockbusters. On a more cultural or social level, you know, the effect of Star Wars was to sort of establish a new definition of what fandom meant. And then it had an international appeal that had never been seen before, I don't think. Hollywood films had been international since their inception, but not with the type of reception that this film had. And so the ideological impacts that are embedded in some of the representations were also huge in sort of redefining what was considered, from a very Western-centric perspective, normal or normative. So lots of things that the film did in its huge, unexpected success in 1977.
Let's unpack a couple of those elements, starting with George Lucas and his vision for the film. What was he trying to create as he was putting this film together and bringing it to the big screen?
Dave, I'm going to, probably offend some Star Wars fans, identifying as one myself quite openly. I don't think George Lucas is necessarily the genius or the brilliant individual that history often credits him with being. I certainly think that his reformulation of old conventions was in itself quite brilliant, but perhaps just as lucky as brilliant. The narrative surrounding his intentions for the film, the larger story of Star Wars that unfolded over decades in front of the original film, has changed largely at his own hands as he tries to sort of create a mythology around himself, I think. And what we see in the original films is an incredible recombining of nothing new as it happens. I mean, old mythological tropes, the Oedipal narrative of the son seeking the father, very, very psychoanalytical approaches to it were popular, especially with the slicing of the hand, with the very phallic lightsaber. And then what we see when he moves away from recombining established conventions, like, for example, the swashbuckler, the Buck Rogers type images that he was recreating, into original narratives, which we see in the prequel trilogy. A lot of the creative energy that built his reputation became obvious to a lot of people that it wasn't there. But these stories were unbelievably powerful, if only for the innovative way that he put other conventions that had been well established together. And, the delightful story of the young, innocent, almost ingenue become space wizard obviously appealed to a lot of people in a combination with the incredibly spectacular special effects that at that time nobody had seen anything like before.
Mm-hmm. What about the fandom? You mentioned the fandom side of this before. They can certainly be considered, let's call them hardcore. But was that level of hardcore fandom something that had been seen in a cultural following of a film before?
as a scholar, I hate to ever give a definitive answer, but this is one of those this is one of those situations where the answer is no. There had never been a fandom of this type or loyalty. And not only did he establish sort of the tripartite narrative structure, which became really popular. We see Indiana Jones do it, where the first movie is sort of a standalone, and then the second movie is a cliffhanger, and then the third movie wraps it all up. This became the convention for movies, like I said, like the Indiana Jones trilogy was originally a trilogy. Then we see, the Lord of the Rings does it. A whole series of films have done it. But these individuals became so invested in it. And part of the reason, I think, is because we have what's called early intermediality. One interviewer in one of the documentaries about Star Wars said George Lucas created a sandbox for kids and adults that they could play in. And of course, the toy market that was established with Kenner Toys is no small element in all of this. So he's producing, mass producing toys that, of course, that was not new, but the appeal of these as they related to the film created sales that had never been seen in the toy market before, at least for a particular line of products. And these toys, in conjunction, again, with the narrative possibilities that surrounded the universe, the galaxy that he had created for everybody to play in, really developed a fandom that some people would identify as pathological. A theorist like Henry Jenkins would suggest it simply as a cultural phenomenon. And what's very interesting is what these individuals who identify as part of the fandom, participate with the fandom, are doing for themselves. But then this standard of fan base, again, we see it establishing what becomes the norm for these big blockbuster institutions like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and other such films, Doctor Who, other such franchises that have the same sort of fantasy impetus underpinning the ability for even the adult mind to play inside the fantasy.
A lot of those subcultures that you described, like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, those have emerged on the cinema screen inside the last 20 years. I'm curious, what's happened in the last couple of decades, pretty much since the release of Episode 1, that has maybe changed subculture like Star Wars from being, quote, for nerds to being a broader, wider range of pop culture?
That is a very difficult question,
I
Dave,
know.
but
I apologize. I know it's early in Victoria as well. I apologize for that one.
I have a couple of ideas. And again, this is when I will shy away from offering a definitive answer, but particularly in the last 20 years, I think two things have happened that may be participating in developing what you described. One of them is pop culture has moved out of sort of a high culture and commercial or low or working class culture binary. Which was typical of scholarship in terms of modernism, was to sort of define popular culture as a residual category, as John Story would say, an other to what is considered good culture, like Shakespeare or Dickens, for example. And that illusion was sort of exploded a little bit when we began to realize that all of these things are signifying practices that have significant impact on the real lives of people. Popular culture, perhaps more than what had become defined as high culture, simply because it's popular. And the other advent, which often sort of gets swept into the technology, under the technology carpet, I'll call it, is of course the advent of digitization in concert with the advent of the internet. And with what can happen with digital film, George Lucas's Episode 1 had the first fully digital character in terms of its screen representation with Jar Jar Binks. And there's some great scholarship on why Jar Jar Binks was so hated, outside of the fact that he's a garish racial stereotype and an otherwise quite irritating character compared to characters that I think he was supposed to echo in the first one. In the first trilogy, C-3PO was sort of a throwaway comic character, again, signifying a number of troubling social stereotypes. But Jar Jar Binks took it to a new level. Some of the animation was not congruent with the realism, so to speak, that people expected of the representations of Star Wars that had been established with practical effects. But with digitization, a whole realm of fantasy possibilities comes available And part of the development of digital or CGI cinema has to be credited to George Lucas's efforts through ILM with the establishment of so many of the special effects in, you're right, particularly Episode 1.
Dr. Christopher, this last answer, I'm sorry, we're a little tight for time, so I've got to hold you to about 90 seconds on it. And I apologize, 'cause it's kind of a big, broad question. But you mentioned some of the problematic inclusion elements that were created along the way here. But in recent years, with some of the recent episodes of the Skywalker saga, we've seen a bigger focus on inclusion, of diversity. How much does a film a popular culture franchise like Star Wars being at the forefront of inclusion possibly ripple into the rest of society?
Incredibly. And to try and keep my answer concise, the very term popular and the very impact. I mean, you don't have to have seen Star Wars to know Darth Vader, but even more impactful is the nature of melodrama and how much of an effect that has on a viewer's mind. You don't have to have seen Star Wars to know also Darth Vader's theme song. And even though the new, I would hesitate to credit Disney with significant progressive social identity politics. You have an African-American character who's unfortunately largely relegated to background comedy, and they continue to represent physical disability in particular as a one-way path towards evil. And so I think we need to cast a critical eye on the celebration of inclusion that has been credited to Disney.
Dr. Christopher, it's been so nice to chat with you today. One last quickie. Do you have a favorite piece of the Star Wars narrative puzzle? Is there a favorite film or a favorite series that you'll always find yourself flipping onto when you're in a Star Wars mood?
Yes, it's Empire Strikes Back. And if only to admit that I participate in some of the more normative elements of our culture, the Oedipal moment when Vader reveals that he is his father as he cuts off his own son's hand was so dramatically pure. It was such incredible melodrama. And of course, the special effects had improved quite a bit as well. Just watching the Millennium Falcon actually move quickly compared to the first movie. I think any diehard Star Wars fan would say Empire.
Dr. Christopher, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today, and may the 4th be with you.
Thank you very much.
That's Dr. David Christopher. He is from the Department of Art History and Visual Studies at the University of Victoria. We were talking about the cultural significance of Star Wars. And I do want to remind you that if you have a favorite Star Wars film or a favorite piece of the Star Wars franchise, that relates to our daily poll, which you can find at AMI Audio on Twitter, or Accessible Media Inc. on Facebook. So the options we gave you are A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, The Mandalorian, or Other. I've already voted Other and said it was Rogue One because I love that movie as a standalone film. You can also send us an email, feedback@ami.ca, feedback@ami.ca, or pick up the phone and give us a phone call, 1-866-509-4545. That's 1-866-509-4545. Coming up after the break, we'll have the regional news update and a sports chat with Jeff Ryman. This is Now with Dave Brown. Welcome back. It's Now with Dave Brown on AMI Audio and AMI TV. I'm Dave Brown. It's Tuesday, May the 4th, 2021. Coming up in the second hour of the show, e-commerce provider Rosie is starting to incorporate accessibility into its online grocery shopping platform. Nelson Rago of Cool Blind Tech will give you the lowdown, and we'll have another edition of our weekly news quiz with a very special guest appearance from the manager of AMI Audio, Andy Frank. He's throwing his hat in the ring, filling in for Karen McGee today, so the competitive juices are indeed flowing. Andy did bring us some donuts this morning, so I don't know if he was trying to butter me up or make me a little bit sleepy with some carbohydrates, but it could be working. We'll see in about 45 minutes. For now, let's bring in Mike Ross for the regional news update.
Thanks, Dave. I know as the host of the quiz, I didn't receive any donuts delivered to my house. So
yeah, if you're going to butter somebody up, you got to butter up the host of the quiz.
You would think there'd be, a honey dip or an apple fritter like on my doorstep, but
a literal greasing of the wheels
did not happen. So guess who has no advantage today? Dave, we're going to begin in British Columbia, where Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry says an increasing supply of vaccines this month could mean that British Columbia residents won't have to wait 4 months for that second jab. She says more than 1 million doses of vaccine are expected in May, but it's too early to estimate the possible difference in wait times, though the province is on track to provide everyone with at least one dose by the end of June. BC reported 2,174 new cases of COVID in the last 3 days, along with 15 deaths, bringing the death toll in the province to nearly 1,600. Henry says that while case numbers are slowly going down, hospitalization rates are still too high, and there's a long way to go before restrictions can be fully loosened. In the territories, Yukon's chief medical officer of health says the territory has one more case of COVID-19 there, bringing the total number of cases to 82. Dr. Brendan Hanley says the latest case is in the Whitehorse area and is related to travel and is positive for the variant first identified in the UK. He says there was no public exposure and the person is recovering at home. Hanley says that if younger age groups start increasing their vaccination rates, the territory could have fewer restrictions in place for the summer. To the prairies, and Tobias Tisson has told court that he cannot force worshippers to follow Manitoba's public health orders because he says it's, quote, God's jurisdiction. Tisson is a minister at the Church of God just south of Steinbach, one of 7 churches in Court of Queen's Bench in Winnipeg this week that are fighting the province's COVID-19 restrictions. Videos of services at the Church of God in January were entered in court and show people singing, hugging, and going without face masks, despite restrictions at the time that required churches to remain closed. Following his testimony, he joined at least 100 protesters in support of the legal challenge outside the courthouse. To Ontario next, where that province is asking a federal vaccine advisory group to look into the possibility of mixing first and second COVID-19 vaccine doses. The province's associate medical officer of health says officials have asked for recommendations from the National Advisory Committee on Immunization. The province is expecting millions of Pfizer-BioNTech doses in the coming weeks, but supply of other vaccines is less certain. Dr. Barbara Yaffe says she expects the federal panel to recommend it is safe and effective to use a different vaccine for a second dose, just as some jurisdictions have already done. And in the Atlantic region, spring lobster seasons in parts of 3 Atlantic provinces are set to open today. The decision came after the Lobster Advisory Committee met with DFO on Sunday morning. Now, the seasons for LFA 23 in northeastern New Brunswick, LFA 24 in northern PEI, and LFA 26A in southeastern PEI and northern Nova Scotia were originally supposed to start April 30th, but were delayed due to poor weather. The seasons generally run until the end of June. This, as police are investigating after a report of 40 lobster traps being cut off the southeastern coast of Cape Breton. The RCMP say the traps were cut from their buoys off of Petit Gras between 5 p.m. on April 29th and 8 a.m. on April 30th. The total loss of the traps and the catch contained within is approximately $10,000. The Mounties say the case involves non-Indigenous fishers, and they have a person of interest. And those are your top regional headlines going coast to coast across the country, Dave.
Thank you very much for that, Mike. Let's bring in Jeff Ryman and have a sports chat. Jeff, fans of the 2 Toronto teams based in Florida have to stay up past their bedtime tonight as the Jays are in Oakland for a tilt with the A's and the Raptors are in Tinseltown for a matchup with the Clippers.
Yeah, so a little bit of a later affair here for us East Coasters, Dave. 10 o'clock, a little bit past your bedtime. And I think, a lot of people might have to set their PVRs for these ones. But the Raptors, they're out west. They're facing the LA Clippers. And, it always sparks that conversation, Dave. The Kawhi Leonard Clippers versus the Toronto Raptors. I think we need to put that to bed. This has been, done for the last year and a half, 2 years almost, when Kawhi Leonard left Toronto. Not really buying that storyline so much anymore. And let's face it, the Raptors season is just about over, just to put it bluntly. And I know a lot of Raptors fans are saying, no, it's not over until it's over. But Dave, they're 3 games behind the 10th place Washington Wizards, who are scorching hot right now. The Wizards are kind of surprisingly late in this season. 3 games behind them for that 10th and final play-in spot with only a handful of games left. And I've already, gone into numerous rants about how tough the schedule is for the Toronto Raptors. So, to tonight, if I'm going to be staying up late and staying up past my bedtime to watch a Toronto team, probably going to be the Toronto Blue Jays, who actually are playing fairly well, even though they didn't really get off to a great start yesterday in Oakland. But it was close. It wasn't a blowout by any means. And the Toronto Blue Jays are starting to come on a little bit here into the early portions of May after kind of a slow start, and I think not really living up to the expectations I think first of all I had of them, and I think a lot of the fan base has had, but it is kind of nice to see the Blue Jays starting to get back on track after they swept those Atlanta Braves, in which, Dave, we did say it was going to be an offensive affair over the weekend. How about the Blue Jays scoring 8.5 runs basically per game against those Atlanta Braves? I think they got 5 runs yesterday over against the Oakland Athletics. I'm going to probably tune into the Blue Jays if I'm staying up past 10 o'clock Eastern time. The people on the West Coast, they're probably laughing at us, but 10 o'clock is pretty late for us here on the East.
Yeah, they laugh at us. They laugh at us old men living our old man lifestyle. So, Jeff, I want to back up to a couple things you mentioned there. So, number one, in terms of the Kawhi Leonard Toronto Raptors rivalry, yeah, it's a little bit silly just in the sense that he left the team on pretty good terms. Everybody knew what the Kawhi Leonard relationship was. It was a one and done. He came in for 1 year. He delivered the team a championship. He was a critical part of that team. He seemed to leave the team on very respectful, good terms. I don't know if there's a lot of distaste or dislike of Kawhi Leonard in that sense. Now, if you were a San Antonio Spurs fan, the way he left that town, that's a little bit different. That said, it's exciting when you play a player like Kawhi Leonard because he's still one of the top 10 players in the league. He's still one of the most exciting players in the league for both his defensive and offensive prowess. So although that there might not be a rivalry to gin up there in terms of getting people to their TVs or their radios, it's just exciting to experience one of the best players in the league. You also made mention of the Washington Wizards. And Jeff, don't worry, I'm not going to dwell here, but they've essentially become must-watch TV since they've gone on a run in the last, about 6 weeks. They've been one of the best teams in basketball, specifically Russell Westbrook, who is in, his 14th year in the league. Last night, he had 22 rebounds and 24 assists. Those are staggering numbers for a point guard.
Yeah, as a point guard, he's 6'3" and grabbing those amount of rebounds and putting up that type of assist numbers. He had a triple double. I think he finished with 10 or 12 points or something.
A measly 12 points.
I kind of joked with a couple of the guys I'm in a fantasy basketball league with, saying he put up a Draymond Green stat line with all those rebounds and all those assists and shooting fairly efficiently. It's crazy to see him do this late in the season and in this late in his career. I mean, usually an athletic point guard like him starts to tail off once he hit north of 30, but he's still doing it on a nightly basis. And you're right, it's kind of must-watch TV. So, as much as Toronto Raptors fans probably want Washington to lose, it's pretty exciting watching Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal do their thing on a nightly basis.
Heck yeah, it is. Hey, Jeff, always fun catching up with you. Enjoy these late games tonight, or maybe enjoy some stuff in the earlier range in the national window.
I'll probably get my beauty sleep, Dave.
Oh, that's Jeff Ryman. He's at the AMI Sports Desk. The Toronto Raptors are in Los Angeles, 10 p.m. Eastern time for a game with the Clippers. That game is going to be available to you on TSN 3, 4, and 5. Let's bring in Nisreen Abdelmajid. She has your national weather updates.
Thanks, Dave. Here is your AMI National Weather Report from Environment Canada. In Corner Brook, becoming a mix of sun and clouds with a high of 8. Charlottetown, mainly sunny with a high of 11. In St. John, mainly cloudy with a high of 15. Quebec City, cloudy with a high of 12. In Toronto, it's cloudy, changing to a 70% chance of showers and a high of 13. In Sault Ste. Marie, periods of rain or drizzle, then cloudy with a chance of showers, fog patches dissipating with a high of 9. In Brandon, it's sunny with a high of 11 and a wind chill of -10. Regina, mainly sunny with a high of 12 and a wind chill of -9. Moving to Lethbridge, it's sunny, cloudiness increasing, then a 60% chance of showers. There's a risk of thunderstorm with a high of 14. In Red Deer, mix of sun and clouds with a 60% chance of showers. There's a risk of a thunderstorm. Fog patches dissipating with a high of 9. In Whitehorse, mainly cloudy, a chance of showers and a high of 9. In Kelowna, mix of sun and clouds with a high of 17. And in Vancouver, it's clearing with a high of 15. And that was your AMI National Weather Report from Environment Canada.
Thank you very much, Nazreen. Coming up next, e-commerce provider Rosie is starting to incorporate accessibility into its online grocery shopping platform. Nelson Rego of Cool Blind Tech will give you the lowdown. But first, moderating social media platforms is not uncommon, but now live audio social platforms are getting similar treatment. Here's Sherry Preston with Tech Trends.
Justin Davis is the CEO of Spectrum Labs. He says policing hate speech and abuse in the live audio space presents some unique challenges.
Was this sarcasm? Was it, what was the gender of the voice?
And he says the growing popularity of live audio on social networks leaves companies like Clubhouse, Twitter, and Facebook with a choice.
Do you lean more on the community to flag stuff and tell me as a platform when I need to pay attention and listen and start thinking about what action I want to take? Or do I try to proactively do stuff which may infringe upon my users' privacy?
Davis notes a more sophisticated AI technology is in the works to help with that proactive moderation.
It's still something we must strive to perfect, even though we possibly never will.
With Tech Trends, I'm Sherry Preston, ABC News.
Welcome back. It's Now with Dave Brown on AMI Audio and AMI TV. Let's talk tech with Nelson Rego of Cool Blind Tech. Nelson joins us every Tuesday, and he's the founder of that group. And he joins us from Edmonton, Alberta. Hey, good morning, Nelson. How are you, my friend?
Good morning, Dave. How's it going?
Not too shabby. Nice to chat with you. As always, you've got a bunch of cool stories lined up for us today, and one of them is coming from the world of e-commerce. The U.S.-based e-commerce provider Rosie is making moves to make their media grocery platform accessible. So, Nelson, I think we have to start here. What is Rosie, and what are some of these accessibility features?
Well, Rosie's a robot from the Jetsons. Or Rosie, actually, Rosie's an online platform, an e-commerce online platform. They partnered up with a number of grocery stores throughout the U.S. And they've recently just made their website accessible. I can't speak too much to the app. I don't think they got around to the app yet because it hasn't been updated in a year, but I tested the website on my phone using VoiceOver, and it's quite accessible actually with a screen reader.
And how is that going to manifest for people trying to do a little bit of shopping?
What do you mean?
Like how's the accessibility going to work for people who are shopping? How's this going to be rolled out?
Sorry, it's one of those days.
I feel you, brother. Listen, man, we're 14 months into a global pandemic. Nobody's brain is firing at 100% right now.
Yeah, we're on lockdown here. I want to get outside. So they've made their website accessible for screen reader users and for people that have low vision or partially sighted. So they've made the contrast, they improved the contrast, they've just made it better overall for someone who's low vision or blind to actually interact with the website.
And what about the in-store experience? I know we're talking about the platform, the online platform, but how might that impact somebody shopping in the store?
Well, in not so much in regards to Rosie itself, but other stores have actually incorporated accessibility apps. There's one called Magnus Mode, and they actually adopted their app to make it accessible for people with autism and other people with cognitive issues. They've adopted something like a virtual card to actually interact, so they can actually actually purchase something in the store. Mm-hmm. So that's actually kind of cool for people with those disabilities.
Right. So that's Trader Joe's down in the U.S. also dealing with some of these improvements for accessibility with this Magnus Mode. So how does that Magnus Mode work exactly? You mentioned there's some cards involved, but how does it work?
Well, Magnus Mode in this specific case, because they specifically partnered up with Trader Joe's, as you said, and in the shopping experience, they have 5 decks of cards. One is a checkout mode, and the other one is sensory mode, and then there's one for labels if you want to interact with the labels. There's also one for this whole pandemic that's going on to how to prepare for that, dealing with masks and stuff like that and guidelines of the social distancing. And then there's one that's escaping my memory, but there's 5 of them. And for example, like the different sounds, there'd be a card for that. And as far as, the sounds of the cashier, the sounds of, the receipt machine that's printing out. So it prepares someone who has those disabilities to actually be prepared for that shopping experience. And then when you're in the checkout mode, there's a part where you can answer yes or no by tapping on the card to the person that may be assisting you, like bagging your bags. So it kind of incorporates that sort of experience in the shopping.
What was the inspiration behind this app?
Well, like many other things, it seems to be a personal connection. The president and founder of the company, Nadia Hamilton, she actually was doing this with her brother, Troy. So she was drawing cards at home and helping him with his experiences, with his life skills. So, she has a personal experience, and all of us can attest to that. When we start up something, we have something that's a personal experience that sort of inspires us to do something to actually help others. And she's done this not only for her brother, but for many people around the world. I mean, when you look at the statistics in the U.S., 1 in 54 people have some type of level of autism. So which is a very high number when you consider the population. So you're looking at tens or hundreds of thousands of people around the world that could actually use an app like this to better their experience when they're shopping.
Yeah, the grocery store has become a bit of a flashpoint for a lot of sensory-friendly solutions. I know that several places around Canada, for example, have sensory-friendly hours where they lower the lights, they lower the music, they lower the beeping of the machines. Like, they really try to make the experience more pleasant. Now, the pandemic has obviously tossed a lot of that out the window. The grocery store is a pretty unpleasant place these days. It's more like Lord of the Flies than a fun shopping experience. But Nelson, this app, you mentioned that it could have some impact around the world. Where can we find it if we want to download it or learn more?
The Magnus cards, it's called by Magnus Mode. You can actually get it on Google Play Store and also on the App Store or the Apple App Store. So it's free. You'll have to set up an account to get it working. I was trying to go as far as I can using VoiceOver, so it seems to be kind of accessible with a screen reader. But it's free on those 2 mobile platforms. And, pretty much if you don't have an iPhone or an Android phone, then, what else is out there now? no one has a Windows phone anymore or Blackberries.
There is one notable member of the province of Ontario who still uses his BlackBerry, and that's the Premier. Apparently, working from home with a BlackBerry was proving to be some trouble for Mr. Ford. But that's that. But let's move back to the world of technology in a more direct sense. Nelson, you like to wrap up with a tech tip every week, and this week you want to talk to us about how we can unlock some of the new voice options for Siri on iOS 14.5.
Yeah, the voices are a big thing for some of us who are always interacting with our devices using screen readers. So if you don't have a pleasant sounding voice, then the experience can be quite unbearable, especially if you're using some of the voices that I've downloaded just testing out. Nothing against JAWS users, but oh my God, you guys got to update your screen reader. So they've actually updated 2 voices, 2 American English voices, specifically for Siri, but VoiceOver users actually can use those Siri voices as well. A couple of other voices they've actually updated as well, like German and I think Irish as well. But this one specifically, they've updated the 2 voices, and they changed it, to be politically correct. They've changed it to like voice 1 to voice 4. So the two new voices are actually number 2 and 3. The original voices are 1 and 4. And if someone that's actually resetting their phone or launching their phone, you actually won't get that default voice anymore. It'll actually ask you which voice you want. So when we're talking about these voice assistants, many of them are becoming more of a male voice now. So it's not just the default female voice that you get with some of the other platforms. So Apple's actually making it so make it out of the box so that you can actually choose a male or a female voice if you choose to for Siri.
So Nelson, as you had a chance to download a couple of these voices and check them out, did you have one that jumped out to you, one that you picked to make your default voice?
So I got the voice. I can't remember what number it is, but it's one of the new voices. It's a female voice. So there's no name, so I can't really identify. But the new female voice that they have there, I think it's number 3. But the other one is a male voice. So the one new female voice is actually pretty. It's a nice voice. So I actually been playing with it on one of my phones as well. So it's I still have it on my phone. So she's pleasant enough to listen to. The other American English voice, I've had her for years on my phone. So because I personally prefer female voices myself. Although I kind of like the Alex voice for voiceover. So that voice is actually pretty good. It's very realistic and even the other American voices that were there before, they've upgraded them so that they sound a little bit more realistic.
Nelson, I'd ask you for a demo, but the act of saying her name is going to send everybody's devices into a tizzy.
I'll give you a demo.
Oh,
Here,
okay.
Check
All
this
right.
out. I don't know if you can see this on the camera. Do you see that?
Is that a iTag? Apple AirTag?
It's an AirTag.
Nice.
I give you that demo.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's not very loud.
Well, let's give it a crack. We'll see what comes out.
Oh, okay. Let's see here. Let me grab my phone. Find Nelson's keys.
I couldn't find anything with that name.
Oh, okay.
That sounds...
Find Nelson's keys.
Looking for Nelson's keys.
Okay.
So Nelson, ooh.
Hear that?
Yeah, I hear it. That's awesome. A little bit of beep in there. We're sending Nelson's Nelson's technology into a tizzy here on a Talking Tech Tuesday with Nelson Rego. So Nelson, that was the new voice. That was the new Siri voice that you picked.
No, that was the voice of the AirTag.
Oh, okay, too many voices in this world.
That was the AirTag when you're trying to find the AirTag. So and as you can tell, like it doesn't last very long. So and just to give comparison to the Tal Pro, so that's what I've been using for years. So it's a little bit smaller than the Tal Pro, but I thought I'd just quickly demo that instead of the Siri voice because I don't know. Sometimes it doesn't work the way you want to.
Yeah.
So
well,
I thought I'd show you the AirTag.
Little improv fun there with Nelson Rego. Hey, Nelson, always fun catching up with you. Have yourself a nice day, my friend.
Awesome. Take care.
That's Nelson Rego of Cool Blind Tech. He joined us from Edmonton, Alberta. Coming up after the break, we'll have an entertainment report with Daniel Pinamondo, and Nazreen Abdelmajid will tell us what's trending. Mike Ross will remind us what happened this day in history, and Ramya Amuthan will give us a preview of Kelly and Company. This is Now with Dave Brown on AMI. Welcome back. It's Now with Dave Brown on AMI. Let's take a look at the world of entertainment with Daniel Pinamondo and the Entertainment Report. So, Daniel, what are people buzzing about in entertainment this morning?
Couple things. First up, this one comes from Deadline.com, but Apple Original Films has secured another Tom Hanks movie for Apple TV+. This one was apparently a weekend auction, so maybe I didn't hear of this, but apparently it was going on. People were bidding for this new movie.
You didn't get the email to personally bid for this film?
No, I didn't get the email to join the Zoom call for the auction process. But this one was for Tom Hanks. It's called Finch, and it was actually previously revealed as BIOS. originally intended to be released by Universal. It's now going to be Apple TV Plus. Like I said, they secured, the movie for themselves, and they're likely going to release it later in the year in award season. The film is directed by Miguel Sapochnik, who helmed some of the most ambitious episodes of Game of Thrones.
Okay.
So I don't know if this is his theatrical kind of debut here in terms of a movie versus coming from a TV background, but he's got 2 Emmys for that show, so acclaimed director. So he's directing this movie. It's about a man, a robot, and a dog, and how they form an unlikely family as the man tries to ensure his beloved canine companion will be cared for after he's gone.
Oh.
Hanks stars as Finch, a robotics engineer and one of the few survivors after a cataclysmic solar event that has left the world a wasteland. So, I don't know, interesting. It probably has the trappings and makings of a nice tearjerker movie.
Oh gosh, anything involving a dog.
You can already tell. And like I said, it becomes the second major Tom Hanks vehicle to transplant to Apple TV Plus after it acquired Greyhound, the World War II thriller from Sony Pictures,
which Amy Amanti, our film reviewer, despised.
Yes, so hopefully this one fares a little bit better.
Daniel, okay, I'm going to sound like an old man yelling at clouds for a second here. You're too fluffy, clouds. It was really neat when a lot of these streaming services occasionally picked up a movie that I was like, oh, that's kind of exciting. I get to watch a movie at home. But now as this pandemic has worn on, I need all these films to go to the theaters. I need to be watching these in the theaters. I don't want all these movies behind digital paywalls at home. I'd rather pay the $10 or $15 to a movie theater than pay a monthly subscription to see these flicks in my living room.
I'm with you, and I hope once things open up for good, these will kind of be maybe simultaneous releases, so you get at least maybe the option of staying home and watching it for the people who want to do that, but also kind of going to the theater if you kind of miss that experience. Go ahead.
Even if it's like a 2-week run, right? Like The Irishman was out for 2 or 3 weeks in theaters before it went exclusively onto Netflix.
I don't remember what the Oscars did with the rule in terms of qualifying movies, but the rule was that you had to do a theater run if you wanted to qualify for the Oscars. I know there was some chatter before. I'm not sure if they changed that rule in the midst of the times that we're living in, but hopefully, the good movies that are gonna go up for the qualifications of the Oscars, hopefully they will still come to theaters, and I imagine they will. I think there are a lot of people out there who are just dying to get back to normalcy and actually get back to theaters, especially for big blockbusters. Tenet, all the big ones. They don't want to. I don't know. It's a different experience. You want to see that on kind of the biggest screen and biggest sound available.
Absolutely.
Next up, really quickly, StubHub is going to offer some refunds for tickets to events in the U.S. and Canada that were canceled because of the COVID-19 pandemic. That's a reversal of the no refunds policy that StubHub put in place last year as the pandemic hit, preferring to give credit rather than cash refunds. StubHub Customer Experience Vice President Darren Fouke says customers will get refunds by the end of May for tickets bought on or before March 25th, 2020. Anything purchased after that date will be issued a credit through the end of 2022. And they say ticket holders for events that were postponed or rescheduled will only get credits. Customers can also resell their tickets on StubHub with no selling fee. So that's just decided to put that out there. I imagine there's a lot of people out there with like kind of outstanding events. I'm one of them. I forget. I keep getting emails from Ticketmaster saying, hey, your Ricky Gervais tickets that you purchased like a year and a half ago, they're still good. I'm apparently going to see him in August if that date still stands.
All right.
I kept getting pushed back, so we'll see if that holds. But for people out there who bought some event tickets, concert tickets on StubHub, there is some news for you.
Yeah, I'm sure for people who lost their jobs last April and wanted their money back, I'm sure it's hugely comforting 14 months later to get those refunds. Anyway, sorry, I don't mean to be jaded and bitter. Daniel, thank you.
You're welcome, Dave.
That's Daniel Panamondo with the Entertainment Reports. Let's bring in Nazreen Abdelmajid. She's going to tell you what's trending. Nazreen, you might find this to be a little bit of a double entendre, but it's a little bit steamy on social media this morning.
It is. But before I get to that, trending number 1 today is May the 4th be with you. Get it? Because it's May 4th. I had to bring that up. Yeah. So for the second trend, it is steamy because it's International Firefighters Day. And the image shown on screen that's going to be shown in a second is an image of a firefighter facing a fire while holding an axe. So when I tell you it's International Firefighters Day, I'm not talking about the TV shows 911 and Chicago Fire who make it look so easy and sexy a little bit here and there. I'm talking about real firefighters who have always been frontline workers saving lives every single day. So today we celebrate these heroes. And ever since I was little, firefighters have always impressed me. Their courage, dedication, commitment to their work, it's inspiring, to be honest. And we see you and we thank you for your service.
So many first responders are people who run towards the danger when the rest of us get the opportunity to run away from danger. And I think that's one of the things that makes firefighters so honorable and so respected, that in those moments of crises, they're the ones we ask to step up.
We're grateful. We're grateful for these workers, and honestly, it's really inspiring. Their work, their courage is really inspiring, and I've always seen that ever since I was little. So this kind of career, this kind of industry will always get to me, and we're really grateful for your service. Dave, before I go, I wanted to ask you, do you have a favorite TV show? I know I wasn't going to mention it, but I'm really curious. Do you have a favorite TV show for firefighters?
Ooh, I don't think so. I'm not really into the first responder style TV.
Really?
It's not really.
I'm so into it.
Well, I'm going to pivot because you had such an honest, earnest look at firefighters and their profession, Nazreen. I want to kind of bounce back a story at you. Back in 2011, the Ottawa Fire Department did a calendar, a sexy calendar of firefighters posing to raise money. And while we talked about it on there that day, I was like, man, we should create a Men of the CBC calendar. That thing would sell like hotcakes. Right? That idea never really jumped. So I don't know if the Men of Now with Dave Brown, I don't think that calendar would really work either.
Have you had the calendar?
No.
Dave.
Nazreen, I'll support the firefighters in other ways. I don't need to keep a sexy calendar on my desk. I objectify men enough on this show that I don't need to be keeping the calendar.
I think a lot of people had, when calendars were a big thing, they had, the cats. I had cats as a calendar. But,
cat calendar's a little safer than shirtless men on your desk. I'll say that much. Nazreen, thank you for this.
Thank you.
That's Nazreen Abdelmajid with What's Trending. Let's bring in Mike Ross with This Day in History, the Now of Then.
Dave, May 4th, 1910, the Royal Canadian Navy was formed. On this day in 1970, 4 students were killed by National Guardsmen during an anti-war rally at Ohio's Kent State University. And on this day, in 2012, the Royal Canadian Mint in Winnipeg struck the final 1-cent coin as it was being phased out after 154 years. The last penny ever made went to Canada's Currency Museum in Ottawa. And those are your events and happenings this day in history.
Okay, I love the Currency Museum in Ottawa. It's not big, but it's super cool, and they're so friendly there, and they're such currency nerds. It's such a good time.
I went a couple of times back in the day when I lived in Ottawa, and the thing that I loved about it was all the greenery around the outside of it. You feel like you're almost visiting like a biodome or something in Montreal, while also checking out some pretty cool currency displays.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mike, what do you think? The Men of Now with Dave Brown, a little calendar featuring you, me, Daniel, Jeff Ryman. If we're gonna pump up sales, we'd have to give a lot of Jeff Ryman on that calendar.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of Panamondo, a lot of Ryman. There's people would be on my month, and they'd be saying, okay, please don't let February be a leap year. Yeah, the less days, the better.
They'll keep us at the back with November and December. Got to put our best foot forward with Dave and Mike at the back. Daniel, you think?
See, I'll do December because I could put my Santa Claus outfit on, and then people would really like that.
There we go. That'd be seasonally festive. Daniel, what do you think? Yep. The Men of Now with Dave Brown, little calendar for fundraising.
I'm opting out too, man. With this pandemic bod I got going on, it's I'm right with you, man.
Oh,
give me the shortest month, please.
The ultimate dad bod right now. Who are you talking about? Give me a break.
Oh my gosh. Oh, thanks guys. Thanks for indulging me in that one. That's Mike Ross with the Now of Then. This day in history. He'll be back as the news quiz master in just a moment. But before that, we get to Ramya Amuthan, who's the co-host of Kelly and Company, which comes your way at 2 p.m. Eastern time on AMI Audio. Good morning, Ramya.
Morning, Dave. Honestly, I think the best approach here is to just put out a survey because the people will let you know if they want They want, what is it, a Men of It Now with Dave Brown?
The Men of Now with Dave Brown. We can expand it to the Men of AMI, because then we can use people like Kelly McDonald and his fame, and Sam Robinson, who does enough yoga that he's a little bit more of a strapping gentleman too.
Oh my God. We want to hear more about the behind the scenes guys too. So yeah, put it to the people.
I know Andy Frank's in the other room right now, probably doing some push-ups, getting himself, getting a little bit of a little pump before we bust out the digital camera later today. Ramya, speaking of later today, what's coming up on Kelly and Company?
All right, so we want to know, what do chiropractors, osteopaths, and physiotherapists do? When we should be going to them and how we know when to go to who. So we're going to discuss this, all of the above, with Francis Wong during our wellness segment. Also, there's a camp, Dave, in Toronto that has lifted the spirits of many kids and families affected by childhood cancer. We're going to learn what they're doing to keep those spirits high, especially during these last 2 years or so, with another year affected by COVID-19. And we have woodworking. This is our monthly talk with Jeff Thompson, and he's chatting about clamps and straps. He calls them the best third hand in the wood shop. So we're curious as to why.
Oh, always fun to catch up with good old Jeff of Blind Abilities. Hey, Ramya, have a great show, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.
Thanks, Dave.
That is Ramya Amuthan. She's the co-host of Kelly and Company, which comes your way at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on AMI Audio. Coming up next, we have another edition of the Weekly News Quiz with a special guest appearance by the manager of AMI Audio, Andy Frank. He's going to be in one of the contestants' chairs against myself and Mark Phoenix, with Mike Ross as the quiz master. Don't go anywhere, because that's coming up next. Welcome back. It's Now with Dave Brown on AMI. As we wrap up this Tuesday edition of the show, I hand things over for our weekly news quiz to our quiz master, Mike Ross.
Thank you, Dave. And yes, we are back with another edition of the Now News Quiz. And our three contestants are Dave Brown, of course. Good to have you back, Dave.
Always a pleasure.
We also have Mark Phoenix back with us again. Hello, Mark.
Good morning, Mike. How you doing this morning?
I'm great. Thank you very much. And filling in for Karen McGee, happy to welcome our manager here at AMI Audio. That's Andy Frank. Hi, Andy.
Mike, I'm exhausted from doing all those push-ups for the calendar.
Oh, we have our three contestants obviously already on fire and ready to go. The quiz is quite simple. We have three contestants. We have 3 rounds of questions. We have 3 questions per round, and each question comes with 3 multiple choice options that our contestants can call upon to help them answer the question. Now, if they can answer the question correctly without hearing those options, I'll give them 2 points. If they need to hear the options and get it right, I'll give them 1 point. If they get it wrong, we move along until the point is awarded. And Andy Frank, you get to kick it off for us here in round number 1.
I'm honored.
Byron Seaman died last week at the age of 97. He was the co-founder of which Canadian NHL team?
Man, I'll need the choices.
Okay. Your options are the Vancouver Canucks, the Calgary Flames, or the Edmonton Oilers.
I'll go with the Canucks.
Incorrect. Incorrect. Dave Brown.
Let's go with the Oilers.
That's incorrect. And Mark Phoenix is on the board with the default point.
Yay.
Byron James, or BJ Seaman, and his late brother Daryl Doc Seaman were among 6 Calgary men, along with Nelson Scalbania, who bought the Atlanta Flames and moved the club to Alberta back in 1980. Dave Brown, question number 2 is for you. Last week, what country announced it would begin bottling Russia's Sputnik 5 vaccine?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'll take the options, please.
Your options are Ecuador, Brazil, or Mexico.
I'm going to go with Brazil.
That is incorrect. Mark Phoenix.
I was going to guess Ecuador.
Incorrect. Another default point. Andy Frank on the board.
Justice.
Yes. Mexico has already received more than 1 million doses of Sputnik 5 in recent months. The country has received 16.6 million doses overall and given some 12 million shots, covering about 9.4% of their population. Mark Phoenix, this one's for you. Authorities say a man was rescued after a tree that fell during high winds trapped him inside a structure at Gettysburg National Military Park in south central Pennsylvania. Where was he trapped?
I'm definitely going to take the options on this one.
All right, your options are in his cabin, in a portable toilet, or inside his RV.
Well, I know for comedy purposes which one I'd pick, so we're going to go with B.
You are correct. Portable toilet it is. According to fire authorities, they found a tree atop a vehicle, but no one inside. And then park rangers told them the tree had trapped a man in a portable toilet. He was taken to Gettysburg Hospital by ambulance with injuries not considered life-threatening. And during the, of course, Battle of Gettysburg, the Little Round Top was the site of an unsuccessful Confederate assault on Union troops.
Mike,
so round one, yes.
Was that his Gettysburg Address?
I was going to make a crappy situation joke.
Yeah.
All of the above. I should give you all bonus points for
Thank
those.
you.
Round one in the books, and Mark Phoenix has 2 points. Andy Frank, 1 point. Dave Brown yet to get on the board, but maybe you'll do it here, Dave. Last week, Oscar-winning actress Olympia Dukakis died at the age of 89. She was famous, of course, for her movies and her work on Broadway, but also graced the television screen, making her 1962 TV debut in the U.S. on what 1960s medical drama?
Well, obviously, I was watching it live at the time. Paul Daniel really bringing the heat today with these questions compiled. Holy smokes. I'll take the options, please, Mike.
Your options are Dr. Kildare, The Doctors and the Nurses, or Ben Casey.
Full confession time. I've never heard of any of these shows.
Oh, boo.
The Doctors and the Nurses?
No. I'm sorry. Mark Phoenix, is it Dr. Kildare or Ben Casey?
I've actually heard of one of these, so I'm going to go with the one I've heard of, Dr. Kildare.
That is correct. Dr. Kildare actually began as a radio show featuring Lionel Barrymore, but the TV version featured not only Dukakis, but a slew of other stars. And over the next 10 years, Dukakis played in many TV screen shows, including some short films, Death Wish. She was also in the film in 1969 film John and Mary with Dustin Hoffman and Mia Farrow, and many more. So Mark Phoenix, 3 points now, and this question is all yours. Ooh. Last month, officials from Quebec City announced their $5 billion vision to apply to host the 2030 Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games. 6 days before their announcement, another Canadian city indicated their intention to apply for those same games. What Canadian city is that?
I love inter-Canadian drama. I'm going to have to take the options.
All right, your options are Calgary, Vancouver, or Edmonton.
For some reason, I kind of want to say Calgary.
That's incorrect. Andy Frank, is it Vancouver or Edmonton?
I'll go with Vancouver.
Got it. It is Vancouver. Some observers believe that of the two Canadian bids, Vancouver would be considered the front runner because they came in with a less expensive proposal than the city of Quebec at just $2 billion. So Andy Frank, 2 points. Mark Phoenix, 3 points. Dave Brown still being shut out. We'll see if that continues. But first, we got to end round two with this question for Andy. It was announced yesterday that Canadian-born Greg Abel was to be the next CEO of Warren Buffett's billion-dollar holding company, Berkshire Hathaway. From what Canadian province does Abel hail?
I'll need the choices, please.
Alberta, Ontario, or Nova Scotia?
Nova Scotia.
Incorrect. Dave Brown, Alberta or Ontario?
Let's go with Ontario.
Incorrect.
Oh my gosh.
Another
Oh my
default
gosh.
point. Wow, you guys really stink today.
Thanks.
Mark Phoenix, you get the default point there. You have 4 points. At the time of the announcement, Abel was Berkshire Hathaway's vice chairman, and also Buffett saying that while Abel will be the next CEO, he still has no plans to retire right away. So round 2 in the books. Mark Phoenix with 4 points. Andy Frank with 2 points. Dave Brown still to get on the board. Mark Phoenix, you kick off the final round of questions with this one. Last week, President Joe Biden delivered his first address to a joint session of Congress. Which president delivered the first State of the Union address that Biden attended as a senator?
Quick math. I was told there'd be no math. Was it Reagan?
It was not Reagan. Andy Frank.
I'll go with Richard Milhouse Nixon.
You are correct. I was hoping I'd get to read the options off because the reference that Mark made there to I was told there would be no math. Of course, the Chevy Chase character on Saturday Night Live of Gerald Ford, who was president at one point. But no, it was, in fact, Richard Nixon in his final State of the Union before resigning over the Watergate scandal. Biden became a senator in 1973, but Nixon that year sent Congress a written message rather than delivering a speech. But there you go, Joe Biden and Richard Nixon. So Andy with 3 points, Mark Phoenix with 4 points, Dave Brown with 0.
It's a true Donut Tuesday over here.
Do I not get 2 points for that guess? Because you never read the options.
You're correct. 2 points for you. We got a tie game.
That's why I'm the manager.
Keeping us honest here. I love it. Pulling a little Anderson Cooper there, keeping us honest.
That's right.
Dave Brown, Shohei Ohtani of the Los Angeles Angels, a rare two-way baseball star, started a game as a pitcher on Monday last week while leading Major League Baseball in home runs hit. Who was the last player to do that?
The man who a chocolate bar was named after, Babe Ruth.
Kinda. It was actually after. It was his daughter that he thought that it was being named after his daughter, Baby Ruth, for the chocolate bar. But no matter, you get 2 points, Dave. That's a big get for you. And the candy bar manufacturer back then said that they'd named it after the president's daughter at the time. I can't remember who the president was at the time, but in any event, Babe Ruth wasn't happy about it. Babe Ruth, 19 home runs on June 13th, 1921, when he appeared as a starting pitcher for the Yankees. Baseball writers describing Ohtani as a revelation, but has had several injuries since coming to the majors in 2018. So going into our final question here, and we've got a tie score here between Mark Phoenix and Andy Frank. And Andy, this question's for you for all the points. In an effort to reduce vaccination hesitancy and encourage people to get a COVID shot, what U.S.-based pastry shop or company is offering free treats if you can show proof of immunization?
I'll need the options.
Your options are Dunkin' Donuts, Krispy Kreme Donuts, or Entenmann's Pastries.
I was going to go with Krispy Kreme, so since it's in the list, Krispy Kreme.
For the win! For the win. Yes, indeed. Krispy Kreme Donuts is offering free donuts if you can prove immunization. Other places in the U.S. That are offering some kind of reward. There have been $50 gift cards that have been offered up. There have been cannabis shops offering up free rolled joints. Joints for a jab is the name of some campaigns happening. And Krispy Kreme Donuts right there. And so with that extra